Rambam wrote this in Egypt, which is very interesting. You see, the Muslims. I don't know that much about Islam, but Islam expects Jews to falsify. Their whole idea is the Jews got it wrong, so we can expect them to constantly make mistakes because they're wrong, and that's why they're infidels. The whole idea of Islam is that Muhammad is the greatest prophet because he got it right. Right? Moses was a prophet. There's a little backing for being a prophet, but everyone got it wrong. Jesus was also a prophet, but he got it wrong. Muhammad's the greatest prophet because he got it right. Okay, that's what you see. So therefore, they're expecting Christianity and Judaism to continue to get it wrong. That's part of their thing. So they're expecting Jews and Christians to continue their lie. That's their problem. On the other hand, Christianity is basically saying, but there's still people in the book. That's why they don't have to kill Christians and Jews. They can keep, as long as the Christian Jews accept their place as second-class citizens. And if they accept second-class citizens, then they can stay in Muslim lands, right? But the other ones, they have no patience for. I mean, it's very interesting. You see this from the Taliban when they blew up the big Buddhas, in the mountains. Everyone was all upset with them. But they were just being good Muslims. They had no patience for idolatry. But but the reason I brought this down is to show the complexity of issues. You look at things black and white, and the Rambam's sitting there saying, it's true that they're not so good, but on the other hand, there's a movement there, and something's happening there. And this happens over and over again in Jewish thought, right? That you can't look at things in black and white. There's this point, and there's that point, and there's this point, and there's that point, back and forth, and you have to go back and forth in all these various viewpoints. So the fact is that this is one of those examples. The reason I brought down this thing with the thing I was talking about democracy is another thing that we find in More Brachos. The More Brachos talks about what do you say on something good happening, what do you say on something bad happening. So it says that on a good happening you're supposed to say a tova meitiv or shechianu, and a bad thing happens you're supposed to say dynamis. So Gemara asks the question: what happens if it's good in the short run and bad in the long run, or if it's good or it's what do I say? Good in the short run, bad or the other way around. It's bad in the short run, it's good in the long run. So the answer is you basically, when the bad things happen, you say dynamis, and when good things happen, you say shechianu. But it's also, this is something that people have such a difficult time accepting. What happens if a parent passes away? Let's say specifically, father passes away, leaves a Yerusha to a son, right? And it's a very, very nice Yerusha, right? So what are the sons supposed to say on the death of their father who's left them a large inheritance? So they're supposed to for sure say dynamic, and they're also supposed to say tov v'meitiv. And people hear that halacha and say, what are you doing? You're talking about the inheritance. Your father just probably talking about. The fact of the matter is the halacha is basically saying it's not talking about what you're feeling, it's talking about the reality here. Obviously something bad has happened. On the other hand, the fact is that now you have more money, and therefore that's something positive. Obviously no one sane or having an ethical bone in their body will say, hey,
say this bracha too.
And say this is I'm glad this happened. Like this is better than that, right? No one's going to say that. But the fact of the matter is to acknowledge that both things did happen. Okay, and the fact it says the bracha doesn't mean whoopee. It just says accept the fact that realities happen. Two things happen are not. The fact is, black and white can be coexistence of two things as well. And sometimes it's complicated. Sometimes it's coexistence of two things that happen. The fact is the good, as I said, short run, long run. It's all these aspects of it. And that's the example I tried to give of democracy. It's very, very nice. People yelling, "Hey, we want freedom." The question is, what's going to happen tomorrow? Are they going to fight for the freedom of the other person? Okay. And the fact is looking at that, and that kind of aspect is what I think permeates a lot of Jewish thought, the recognition of the true complexity of a situation and the balance of it. And we live in a world where people really attempt to simplify. Black and white, this is good, this is bad, without recognizing that really there's an override both ways. The Rav, Rabbi Soloveitchik, was very adamant about the fact that the essence of Jewish thought was always a dialectic. That the dialectic is a coexistence. Like he would say that the term dialectic comes up in Hegelian philosophy. So he basically said in Hegelian philosophy there's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. He said in Judaism there's only thesis and antithesis. There's no synthesis. Now I'm not going to go into that extreme that there's never synthesis, but he says that you have to have the concept of parallel considerations at both times. Two things coexist which are inherently contradictory. And that's sometimes what we have to, not everything, we have to come to a halakhic conclusion. Halakhic conclusion is what's going to be the action. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's beautiful. Like in the world we have today, it's like everyone likes to think of things as always having nice, it's a beautiful ending and you tie it all together and it's everyone lives happily ever after. The fact of the matter is that there is a dialectic, and that dialectic means that two things exist which cannot easily coexist, and we have to keep both things in mind. Okay, and sometimes we have to pick an action. We have to recognize action. That's why in certain ways, you see from a lot of people that they try to make everything nice. They try and say this is a situation, everything's going to be nice. The fact of the matter is that it's not that way. The morale in Prague said that there's a little bit there's a little bit of tuma in everything that's tahor, and there's a little bit of isur in everything that's mutter, and so forth. Not everything comes out, beautiful in the end, and sometimes you have to actually maintain that consciousness at the same time. And that's where things get difficult, when you try and maintain that consciousness. There's so many situations where people give arguments, and they try to make it seem that everything's going to be wonderful if you follow this halachic action and so forth and so forth. And the fact is that's not always so.
We don't have a cause and effect halacha.
No, we don't. But a lot of people want to think we do, because it's very, very hard for people to. In fact, even if they're following the halacha, it's very, very hard for people to accept the fact that there be negative consequences from a halachic observance. And, one of the classics, with other Rishon, so Purim's on our mind in some ways, but the classic perception of Esther, when she goes into Achashverosh, she basically ends her relationship with Mordechai, and it's a very sad reality. I mean, the story of Esther is a very, very sad story. We're dancing around singing in terms of Purim, it's wonderful, and she saved the Jewish people, and so forth and so forth. But the poor lady's life was miserable. When she was living with a non-Jewish king, she, love was not a question. She was basically forced to live with this king, who was, Achashverosh was not a nice guy, and she, this was her life at the same point in time, and people don't want to mention it. It's got everything's got to be, happy and so forth. The fact is that there's consequences to everything, and there's realities in that regard. And we have other issues like that in halacha, like for example the balance of chesed and din, and making decisions like that, and understanding that sometimes what is din, was correct, in terms of justice, is not going to be correct in terms of compassion.
Well, then there's spirit and letter of the law also.
That's true, but even at that point in time, there's a concept where, see, it's interesting when you say about the spirit and the letter of the law, but the fact is that certain points in time, it's important to understand distinctions in the fact that there's justice, and justice isn't always compassionate. Okay, and that a person who's it's interesting, like the person who's really hungry steals a loaf of bread. Well, it might be sakanas lefashos. So if it's sakanas lefashos, if it's life-threatening, then you can do an aver to life-threatening. You know, but the fact is if someone, you know, like I was, I remember once in Eretz Yisrael, I was at a bus station in Eretz Yisrael, and there was this lineup, and there was this American couple standing in line, and there was an Israeli who butted in front of him. Okay. And there was a fight going on there. And the Israeli basically said, "What? You should get on the bus. Okay, did you fight in any wars? You know, did you get shot at? What? You send your money over here? A big deal. I mean, you know, like, I got shot at, lady. You know, like, leave me alone, right?" And I'm watching this going on, and I'm sitting there saying, on a certain level, I saw the guy's point. I mean, he's basically saying, like, I have more rights than you because, you know, you're here and you're enjoying the country, but it's up to me. On the other hand, there is some civilized rules here of standing in line. This poor little lady didn't do anything. She was just standing in line. And you see these kind of issues, and when you look at it, you're saying, well, there's this point and there's that point, you know, and it's not so easy to really work these things out. Now, the truth is that legally, in a justice sense, okay, so there's a certain rule of society to follow, to accept lines, you know, in order and so forth and so forth. On the other hand, you know, you hear this guy's point. Should that be a consideration? And of course, the lady sitting there saying, "I'm also supportive of Israel. I give money to Israel. I mean." She lives in America. What's she supposed to do? She's supposed to join the army, and you know, she's an older lady. I mean, what do you want to do? She's feeling I'm supporting the nation as well. It's so interesting watching the dynamics and the fact that there's no simple answer. Now, I can give an answer in action, but the answer in action does not basically give an answer or not. You know,
it's the best attempt at synthesis.
Right.
That you can get
but
to,
the fact is,
it's still the coexistence of both,
right,
given the merits of any given situation.
Right. However, the fact is that the thing about synthesis, it seems to say this is the answer ethically, and the truth is the synthesis and the action. You've got to come up with an action, but it's not the synthesis of the other two values,
right.
And you have to recognize that.
Almost sort of reminds me, like once in a while I've seen these sort of horribly tragic birth announcements where they'll say, you know, we welcome, you know, this child and, you know, his angel twin who passed away at the same time. And you realize, like, that's kind of a situation where very contrasting situations, but there isn't any synthesis. It's both a miracle and a tragedy.
Right. You're right. And the fact is people try to, you know, turn over things and like the baby that was lost is now up in heaven, and you know, it's like, you know, I remember going to a shiva house of a you know, a young woman died and her parents were sitting shiva, and this guy was sitting beside this father who lost his daughter, and he was going and says, she was such a special neshama. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want her to be away from her anymore. He wanted her beside his throne. Right? So he had to take her away from you. I'm looking at this thing, and I'm sitting there saying, I'm looking at the father. I said, if a guy would say that to me, right, I think chas v'shalom, you know, but I think that you'd have to hold me back from smashing the guy. I mean, first of all, the theology was so, you know, like I felt like saying, it's unbelievable. And people turn it around.
But people don't realize in situations like this what true silence means.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
First of all, there's the discomfort of silence.
Right.
Second of all, they've been brought up to say certain pat phrases that if they gave even a second thought, not a fifth or sixth.
Right. But the thing is, that's exactly it. There's certain pat phrases because there's a real attempt not to see complexity.
Right.
It's a real attempt not to see complexity, and it happens in so many halachic issues, where people want to say this is all good and this is all bad, and therefore everything lives, you know, lives happily ever after. And the fact is reality is not built upon that. And therefore there are consequences and consequences, and to understand that complexity, and to try and work out this complexity.
So how do you address Rabbi Gamzu in all of this?
Gamzu
Latova. It's all is good.
Fact is,
even what we call bad.
That's not what he means.
Okay.
That's not what he means.
I'm looking for a definition.
The fact is that Gamzu Latova means that what occurs has its purpose, or has its point. But it's not a simplistic understanding of this being good. It's an aspect that says that this, and sometimes that point is to feel the tragedy, or sometimes to deal with the tragedy. But it doesn't mean turning it around and saying, oh, there's a point to everything that happens. Everything has its purpose. But that purpose is not simply understandable. Okay? And that's what's going. That's really what Gamzu Latova means. It means this has its purpose. It's not for naught. But the fact is, you try and figure out the purpose, and the fact is that in many ways we can't know the purpose. We're not supposed to know the purpose, and part of it is to recognize we don't know the purpose. Sometimes the Gamzu Latova is in a certain way, if it causes you to not have natural reactions to situations, that's not good. The Gamzu Latova is having natural reactions to circumstances that ultimately it may have a purpose to it. Okay, and that's working on a different level. And the fact is that once you find purpose, try to turn around, find something positive about it, and so forth. But the movement towards simplicity exists throughout the Jewish world these days, and it's really taking away.
You think it's a newer phenomenon? I think it's accelerated tremendously.
Because
whether or not it's
our technical stuff, everything is instant, and I don't know.
The fact is that it's very true. I think that. I think Joe's right. I think the fact is that there was always a trend towards simplicity. Some of the reasons for simplicity is because a lot of people can't handle the complexity. They don't have the intellectual ability to handle the complexity, or so forth. But which leads to other issues. But I think what happens, what you're saying with information, is that the more information we have, the more we think we know what we're talking about, much more easily. And even though we didn't get that. Right. The fact is that the perception of knowledge and wisdom is a real problem, in the sense that all the knowledge in the world does not make you wise. There's a distinction between knowledge and wisdom, and we are becoming much more leaning towards the fact that knowledge is the definition of smart. Right? Jeopardy. You ever watch it? Oh, that guy's really smart. You know, because he knows a lot of facts. Half the facts is irrelevant, but even the facts that he knows, that's important. But the fact is to try and get him to say, okay, let's see what you can do with those facts.
Can you do good in the world?
Right. Or can you think your way out of a paper bag? The fact is that that's what's happening.
It's like those professors who are so dumb.
But yeah,
there's no analysis.
But underlying it is an issue with the movement of complexity demands of us, especially in a theistic way, of being challenged by these things. I always refer to this, and it's a little bit of a difficult issue, but you take, let's say, the laws of Nida, okay, and the effect it has on marriages, and there's a whole attempt in our world today to say this makes marriages work and makes it better, and so forth and so forth. There are many situations with couples that attempting to abide by these laws actually has a very damaging effect on the relationship. I wouldn't say totally damaging, but it's difficult. And people try, no, it should be like this. I remember one time when I was early in my rabbinical career, a couple came over to me and they wanted to talk to me. And they basically said to me that what was happening, they're newly married, what was happening as they observed the laws of Nida was not what everyone told them was going to happen. That after the wife went to mikveh, there was a certain period of adjustment. They haven't been together for a long time, and just as they're getting comfortable with each other again, she again goes into Nida, and I find it's very problematic. So at that point in time, I pulled up somebody by the Rav, and I showed this person what the Rav said. And the Rav said that he basically defined Nida as almost like a Sisyphus experience. You try and get closer, then you fall down again and get closer. And they found tremendous, because they said, they thought, what are we doing wrong? Right? Everyone's saying it's supposed to be this, and what are we doing wrong? It wasn't just the fact of how, one aspect is how it affects the relationship. And that's the working of the relationship, and there's a reason for it, whatever it is, that's something else. But the other thing is they also felt guilty. What are we doing wrong by having this? So I just showed them, the Rav basically describes that as perhaps his experience. He was talking he presented the experience of that nature. And the fact is that, and that's not something that you're going to say, hey, I like it, this is what I want, but it affects you a certain way, and there's certain culture and so forth. But the reason I point that out, it really points out the fact that, I was just saying this to someone recently, is that the fact is that anyway, halacha reacts differently to any human beings. Human beings are all different. They all have different emotions, different reactions, and halacha works differently on every one of them. And to say every human being is going to have this response to this event, how many people are different, these human beings? Everyone's not going to have the same feeling about Shabbos, they're not going to have the same feeling. And then there's this idea, well, if I'm not feeling it, then what's wrong with me? Right? In what way?
Find yourself a good Rav who understands you.
Exactly.
Understands the couple who understands
the fact that happens leads to an interesting tension in Psak as well, between the movement towards, let's say more universal Psak and more particularistic Psak. And this is a tension in Psak, in the sense that let's say, we're going to be clear, let's say the Gedolim have more knowledge, objectively, of material and so forth, and clearly on that. But halacha also has to be told to specific situations. Halacha is not monolithic. And what it means is that a lot of times in halachic decision makings, the individuals that you're paskening for are factors in the halacha. So you have this tension that there are certain people who say, well, the shalah has to go to the gadol, but the gadol doesn't know the individuals. And there's other people who say no. The gadol is there to be approached by the Rav to discuss the ideas, but the psak has to be rendered by the Rav of the particulars. I had a situation once with a psak, and it was a big issue, and I phoned someone who was a posek, and I said, he said, I'm not taking the psak. It's your psak. You can talk out the issues with me and work it out. And there was a halachic arguments, but the psak has to come from you, because you know the people on the ground. You know the situation on the ground, and the fact is that that's very much the same thing. And then another tension between universal concepts and particular concepts, you find it all the time. But the perception of trying to create everything as a normalcy, and even the difference in personalities. That's why in certain ways the best way to come across is by defining every human being the same. If you give a lot of lip service to the fact that Kodesh Baruch Hu created every human being unique and everyone's different, but the fact of the matter is to make it work, you basically say all people want to do this, right? All women want to have children. Well, this woman doesn't have children. She doesn't know what she wants. She really wants children, right? But she tells me she doesn't want to have any kids. She really does, and this happens all the time. When a person says, I don't think I'm too interested in that. Now, I'm not trying to get to halachic issues. I mean, that issue gets on halacha issues and so forth. There's other reasons why women should get married. There's reasons for women to assist their husbands in their desire to have kids and so forth. So I'm not advocating women to say, I'm not going to have kids. There are issues like that. There's a Tosfos, for example, that says maybe a woman's not mechuyev in puravu, but she's mechuyev in l'shevet, which is to have one kid. So I'm not going to get into halachic issues, but the point is, it's always so simple. If you say all people are like this, you have an answer. But once you start saying all the people are different, then the halacha, as it affects all these people, it's a different thing, and it creates greater complexity. So the fact is that it's just something that I find so existent in the world, where we are moving away from well, actually, we've always been like this, but I think it has been accelerated. In a sense, I think it's been accelerated a lot by Kiruv as well, because we're trying to sell the product. And we try to sell product. This is wonderful. This will be great for you, right? And everyone's going to like this. Well, in a certain way, comes to the Tova. Obviously, I believe the Torah will be beneficial to every person. But how it's beneficial to every person is different. I remember when I first got married, we had a poster up in our house. It was a cat in a vice. You know, you see this cat sort of being squeezed in a vice, and I don't think they hurt the cat, but it said, "The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable." and the fact is that in certain ways, the Torah experience is not one of happy. It's not happy Judaism. The Torah experience is saying, listen, it's hard work, and it's going to be challenges and so forth and so forth, and then you have to figure these things out. In the end, hopefully you'll get to a point where you'll see why it actually had some beneficial aspects to it. But in that way, it'll be different, and don't think it's going to come out 100%. There's always interesting repercussions. I remember one of the I used to be very, very makbid, very careful, but always respecting books. Like, get very angry with anyone that attack any sefer, any book. If a person with a book, you have to respect it. And then somewhere in the late 70s, I came across some books that basically I couldn't have any respect for. It just got me like, I would sit there and say, no, a book you have to assume that it's treated with respect. It's got to have some value in it. I came across a couple books that and one was this book called How to Stop an Intermarriage. I was reading this book. I read this book, and basically this book was how to manipulate an individual, right, to get out of an intermarriage, because you don't want them to be married, to go out with someone who's not Jewish or whatever. And basically, it's a book of these are the manipulative things you can say to that person. This is not.
Strike was one of them.
This was not said in that term, but it was obviously saying, like, it's really better for them, right? So one of them is tell them that an intermarriage never works. There's always friction over religion. At the same point in time, I was also reading the biography of Harry Cosell, who was married to a non-Jew, and all he was talking about is how wonderful his marriage life was, and they were really in love and so forth and so forth. And I said, yeah, okay. The fact is that, obviously there's a concept of intermarriage, so forth and so forth, but to try and say, hey, this is the way it is, that's just trying to give simple answers. And I was very upset by it, because it was basically saying, here's how to manipulate. And I was upset with that. That's not the way you're supposed to do it. You're not supposed to say, hey, I'm supposed to manipulate you. You have a real issue, then raise the issues to the individuals. Talk about it. Figure out what the issue is. Point out the issue, the problems, and so forth, There's other concerns, but we try to simplify, and we try to turn things down to a certain issue, and we try to say, like, it's like, this happens all good, this happens all bad, and it's very far from that. Anyways,
the other thing is Nasa.
yeah.
But we had a mountain on top.
The fact is that the fact is
now that's tension.
The truth is that I'm actually doing this on my Monday night class with the I have a Monday class for university women, and I've picked out a few sections on Nasa Nishma.
When did you start that university women class?
A few weeks ago. Yeah. And what I mentioned was Nasa Nishma. It's an interesting thing that you have to have both. The point of the matter is at the same point in time, because Nasa Nishma, the very fact that God says, do you want it, and gives you the chance to say yes, I'll take two. But the fact is that you all know that joke,
I'll
right?
Take five.
You all know that joke, right? God says, God went to all the nations, says, what's in it? What's in it? Says, how much is it? No charge. We'll take two. Right? Okay. Anyways, the point is, we're talking about that, and the truth is, there is a tension, exactly a tension. On one hand, it had to be a free choice decision. It was not God as authority or king saying, do this. On the other hand, we're a contract. Therefore, you have to make the decision. It has to be your free choice. On the other hand, it still had to be an aspect of the authority of God. You had to have these both ideas. On one hand, you have to have the authority concept. On the other hand, you have to have the fact that it's entering into a free will decision. So the fact is, those two things coexist at the same time, and it's really problematic. But the thing also from it is that even Nasa Nishma is not fully understood by most people, in the sense that Nasa Nishma, if it was just a matter we're going to do it, we would have said Nasa. But Nasa Nishma basically says we're going to do it, but then we're going to understand why. And a lot of the Jewish experience is trying to figure out why. It's not simply being autonomous and saying, oh, we're going to do it, thank you very much. It's basically trying to find why.
And the best we can do is hope to get close to why, because we never understand why.
You never understand why. It's always a little bit beyond you. But the fact is that, and that's where the authority concept comes in, because one of the whys is because it's the authority of God. So the fact is that's part of the reason as well, that God has the authority to command. But but most people shy away from the complex, and therefore everyone's assuming that you'll just love it. And I find it very interesting in terms of that simplification of the whole system. And it really takes away from the system, because the complexity of the system is perhaps I think it's the greatest aspect of it. In certain ways, it changes life into a place which really is a source of tremendous growth and creativity and thought. I mean, I may be selling the religion, but the fact is if people understand that this is what we are trying to live this life and understand it and trying to work for it, as you say, trying to work for it, then it completely changes the way you look at life. You basically say, what am I going through here? What is this happening to me? It makes it much more of a fuller experience.
You have to be careful about pretty is palatable.
Yes, absolutely. No doubt about that, and it's happening all over. But that's built. It's really built upon simplicity. It's remarkably built upon simplicity. It basically turns human beings into very, very simple beings. You'll like it. Try it. You'll like it. It's basically, that's what it comes down to. And,
but going back to Nasa Nishma.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about this. There's a perspective here where Bnei Israel were very vulnerable at that point in time. I mean, they're in the desert. They were in Egypt. Whether they worked hard or not, they had some food to eat. They weren't in this hot, stifling place. I mean, they needed a leader. Okay, now Seven Nishma, what are we going to ask for? Well, can we kill like Bnei stuff? Can we steal? But who cares? We need somebody to guide us.
The fact is when you read through it, I mean, that's part of the depth of the issue. I mean, you think about that. You had these people who were basically slaves, surviving in the desert. Like, God talks to them. Well, let's understand what's God doing. First of all, they're living within the Inyanei HaKavod. Right, they're getting man from heaven. Right,
so what else do they do?
They're living in the Inyanei HaKavod. Right, They're in a completely different world space. That's why when you look at the Medrash and said God went to all the other nations. Yeah, but all the other nations weren't saved from Egypt. All the other nations weren't living in a miraculous situation of the desert with. Well, and not in the heated desert because you had the Anana Yakavit, they were air conditioned. You know, the fact is that it was pretty okay. You know, I mean, what are you going to say to them? God says, hey, listen, it's this massive event, right? I'm God who just took you out of Egypt, and this is what I'm telling you to do. Oh yeah, let me think about this. Yeah, I'm not sure. You know. But then again, you see that throughout the desert experience, the nation keeps saying, hey, it was better for us in Egypt. Where were these guys coming from? I mean, the fact is that if you read the Chumash, I mean, one of the big differences in Judaism from fundamentalist Christianity is we are anti-fundamentalists. Because if you read the Chumash, I mean, that was the issue with the Karaites. I mean, we say you can't read the Chumash and understand it. Whatever reason, that text is not comprehensible. Doesn't make any sense, right? And you look at these things; they look like they're crazies. I mean, like, come on. And same thing already going back in terms of Avram and Yitzchak and Yishmael and Esav and Yaakov. I mean, you know, everyone tells the Medrash, you know, there's all these malachim coming by Avram's house. There's all these things happening, these miracles, and so on and so forth. Esav wakes up one day and says, I'm going to go kill someone today. Hey, did you get the message? I mean, like, you know, what's going on over there? It's very, I mean, and even you look at the Amalek. I mean, you look at in the parts of Amalek. You know, here you have, the Jews just got out of Egypt. They wipe out the Egyptian king. All these remarkable miracles, and the little Amalek says, "We're going to go to war with them." Excuse me, where are you coming from? You know, I mean, like, you know,
you got a chance.
No, that's a real problem with the Meraglim. And the Meraglim go in there. I mean, you read about this, and the miracles are happening there left and right. They're being supported by mom, so forth. You know, we can't. You know, we're concerned about taking Egypt and taking Israel. Excuse me. Let me hear that again. Like, you're concerned about defeating the 7 nations in Israel. Did you check your secret weapon over here? What's going on over here? It's obviously a lot more complexity. But the thing is how people simplify it. They turn it into such simple mush. And this is bad, and this is good. Come on. And we've talked that many times. The fact is that there's such... Is that the whole Chumash demands complexity.
I think that's why we a lot of times